Back in 2022, Formula One announced that starting with 2026, all the race cars will be running on fully sustainable fuels, which means that no new fossil carbon will be burned for Formula One. Instead, and I quote, they say that the carbon will come from non-food biological sources, genuine municipal waste, or even extracted directly from the atmosphere. Very nice. Now, the calendar of Formula One in 2023 included around 150,000 kilometers of land and air travel between the individual events, largely due to the fact that the order of the race events in no way prioritizes the reduction of land and air travel. When moving on land between European destinations, the teams of Formula One rely on around 300 cargo trucks, which travel from destination to destination, transporting the race cars, the engine, the other spare parts, all the tools, a bunch of other equipment, hospitality equipment, as well as all the parts needed to establish accommodation for the teams at the race event. These buildings are then constructed at the race event, and they equal pretty much a small-scale temporary hotel where the teams and their staff is housed during the event. When traveling between continents, Formula One relies on around 6 to 7 Boeing 747 cargo planes, which transport everything between continents. Now, DHL is Formula One's logistics partner, and they estimate that for 2023, the planes will do 130,000 kilometers per plane. On land, we will do around 20,000 kilometers, but there's 300 trucks. Now, when we add up all of this math, we get around 6.8 million kilometers needed to complete the 2023 Formula One season. And all of these 6.8 million kilometers, pretty much all of it, is on non-sustainable diesel and jet fuel from gas stations and other fuel providers. Now, when we add the math for the race cars, we get that all the race cars for all the events, they account for 1.9% of the total travel or vehicle movement of Formula One. And that does not include all the visitors that come to all the events to see them live with their cars, buses, motorhomes, caravans, camper vans, you name it. So we will get a 1.9% improvement in Formula One sustainability in 2026, in 3 years. Not this season, not the next one, not one after that. In 3 years. Our next example comes from BMW, who like to boast how their cars contain up to 20% recycled plastics and how they recycle metal shavings during the manufacturing process of their vehicles. Now, here's what they also thought was a good idea, and that's a monthly subscription for heated seats. Basically, all the hardware, the heating elements, the wiring, the switches, the relays, the fuses, together with all the software needed to make heated seats work, is installed into every vehicle. But you can't use it unless you pay a monthly subscription for heated seats to BMW. Of course, as we know, many cars exist in very warm climates, and many people may choose not to pay the subscription for heated seats for whatever reasons. Which means that we have equipment which is manufactured and will have to be recycled at some point in the future, but it will never be used. And of course, the manufacturing of vehicle equipment, as well as anything else, has an environmental impact. The future recycling of that equipment also has an environmental impact. And the added weight of this equipment negatively impacts the fuel efficiency of the vehicle. Now, KTM motorcycles, they had a very similar idea, and they call it demo mode. And demo mode basically means that they install a very wide array of electronic rider aids and ride modes and other features into every motorcycle. These, of course, require their own sensors and wiring and other electronics, as well as their own software. And after 1,500 kilometers of riding, all of them get deactivated. And you get to continue using only the ones that you pay for. Which means that, again, we have the deliberate manufacturing and future recycling of things that will never be used unless the manufacturer receives a profit. Something else that's an increasingly popular practice among car, motorcycle, truck, and farm equipment manufacturers, all of whom claim to be socially and environmentally responsible, is that they like to make parts impossible to repair. So parts are either purposely welded or sealed or soldered or otherwise made in a way that they cannot be accessed or repaired. And as we know, repairing something is far better for the environment than recycling that and making a brand new one. A similar practice involves part fusion. For example, we have intercores fused into intake manifolds or other types of complex multi-component assemblies where the failure of one part requires the replacement of the entire assembly, which means that we have fully functioning parts ending in the trash. The final part of this barrier against third-party maintenance and repair is made by using proprietary or extremely expensive special tools together with software walls which require the registration of a part or something similar to restore vehicle functionality. But vehicle manufacturers aren't alone in this. Tech giants like Apple and many other manufacturers of consumer electronics are also experts at greenwashing. Apple likes to boast how their new Apple Watch is their first carbon-neutral product. The wristband has 30% recycled plastics in it. But Apple and many other manufacturers of consumer electronics and tech giants and many others have spent millions on making their devices impossible or difficult to repair through methods we just mentioned. And then they spent further millions to lobby against the right to repair legislation in order to keep their devices unrepairable and force consumers to buy new devices. And as we can easily deduce, not repairing something, recycling it, and then making a brand new one is a lot worse for the environment than simply repairing an already existing device. So what we can also come to a conclusion is that all this money that has been spent on making stuff unrepairable and then lobbying to keep it repairable, instead it could have been spent on making things easier to repair, and then empowering and educating third-party repair shops or even consumers to repair these devices themselves. This would have been a truly measurable positive impact for the environment. But of course, it would also negatively impact future profits of the company, making it essentially an act of charity. And Apple, BMW, KTM, Formula One, and all of the other businesses and corporations you can think of, none of them are charities. So based on this, we can conclude that the problem with our world is that it's profit-based and ruled by giant corporations which have so much power and money that they can bend governments and legislation to their will. Following this line of thinking, the solution to that problem is to then dismantle capitalism and embrace something like communism while setting environmental well-being very high on the list of priorities, and then a world of harmony and happiness shall ensue. Communism does have some interesting prospects which may work in theory, but capitalism is not the problem. And communism is not the solution. The problem is the distribution of power. Capitalism places immense power in the hands of corporations. Communism places immense power in the hands of the government and its various bodies. Whenever there is a group of humans with immense power at their disposal, some humans within that group will inevitably abuse that power. The greater the power and the more unchecked it is, the greater the incentive to abuse that power. And the motivation behind the abuse of power is almost always greed. So now we arrive at the conclusion where greed is the problem. Well, believing that greed is the problem is just as naive as believing that communism can save the world. Although social etiquette, morality, religion, whatever teaches us that greed is bad, this perspective is essentially very superficial and naive. And that is because greed is hard-coded in human DNA. It is also hard-coded in the DNA of many animals. For example, a wolf jumping into a pen full of sheep will slaughter all the sheep he can, even though he can only carry and eat one sheep at a time. Greed has made humans thrive. It is behind an immeasurable number of innovations and social advancements, and it is always pushing us to go further and do more to live better and to live longer. Communism shuns greed. Capitalism embraces it, which is one of the reasons why ultimately capitalism prevailed over communism. Communism sounds great in theory. It has many very interesting prospects, but the current state of human mentality, morality, consciousness is not able to sustain communism. Humans have evolved to the point where we can imagine communism, where we can imagine the collective ownership of everything. But we have not evolved to the point where we can put it into practice successfully. So if greed is hard-coded in our DNA, that means we can't get rid of it, which means that we will drive our world to self-destruction through endless consumption. We will keep producing, selling, and consuming until we are drowning in garbage and sizzling in our hazmat suits under the scorching heat of the climate-changed future. Maybe. To understand everything better, let's equate all of humanity into a single individual. And if we imagine that all of humanity is just one human, then that human would certainly be smoking, because our collective activities create a lot of smoke, a lot of emissions, but at the same time we're addicted to it because we're addicted to our pleasurable, plentiful lifestyles. So to solve our problem, we have to ask, when do most humans quit smoking? And the answer to that is fear. Fear is the only motivator as powerful, actually more powerful, than greed. Most humans quit smoking when the doctor tells them that their health has severely deteriorated due to the effects of smoking, or when they feel a shortness of breath, or when they get a horrible disease like cancer. So, in other words, humans do not undertake corrective action until there is a tangible, immediately visible negative consequence. And this is why it's so hard to try and convince anyone to change their lifestyle or their behavior in the interest of the environment. There simply isn't an immediately visible negative consequence yet. For example, the air quality in big cities, it's poor, but it's not too bad. We can still breathe well enough. The weather is going kind of crazy, but it's not too bad. It's bearable, and somebody's going to dig out a statistic how it was just as bad that one day in 1932. There's a Texas-sized garbage patch, but it's somewhere in the middle of the ocean, far away, and not in front of our doorstep. So basically, we are now at the stage where we are smoking. The doctor is warning us, telling us that we should quit smoking because it will eventually kill us, but we still haven't gotten cancer. Our health is still okay-ish, so we're continuing to smoke. Of course, the analogy here, the doctor's warnings, are scientific research about humanity's impact on the environment, climate change, sustainability. All of this research we're all very familiar with. Now, what's important here is the reaction of the big players, the corporations, to this scientific research, because corporations very much define what's happening in our world. They are the movers of the important things. And in most cases, corporations will choose to ignore this research, the doctor's warnings, and they will resort to greenwashing in order to keep up public appearances, to make themselves look environmentally and socially responsible, because they hope this will lead to profit maximization if they have a good public image. And profit maximization is, of course, all corporations really care about, because they are profit maximizing entities, and there's no limit, there's no profit cap that they desire. If they achieve a profit goal, they'll simply want more, and this will keep going on into infinity. And there's really nothing evil about it. There's no need to get hateful or emotional towards corporations or resort to anti-intellectualism or any of the other widespread online reactions we see nowadays. This is simply the anatomy of the corporations, which is a part of the physics of our socio-economic model. This is how things work. That's what capitalism is. However, the greenwashing here, that's important, because it demonstrates that there is a reaction. It demonstrates that corporations, large entities, governments, they can be moved. A reaction can be received from them, an output can be received from them if we give them some sort of input. The problem is that the input is weak. This is key. So, for example, the 1.9% sustainability improvement from Formula 1, that's the best we can do. But again, it's something. It's better than nothing. It shows that even something as fossil fuel centered as Formula 1 sort of pretends to care about the environment. Another example, there's many more. For example, the EU twisted Apple's hand and forced them to adopt the universal charger. Again, not much, but it's something tangible, visible. There's even some changes in relation to the right to repair legislation. Very little, but it's something. And BMW, they got rid of their heated seat subscriptions. They kept their subscription-based business model for pretty much all the other features, but they got rid of the heated seats. Again, very little, but it's something. Why just the heated seats? Because this was something that was very relatable, easily understandable, very suitable for the media, and also, most importantly, very suitable for sharing online. So it went viral, generated this big negative reaction, a big output on something, and this forced a big input on something, and this forced BMW to make an output, a reaction, to get rid of the heated seats. And this demonstrates that nowadays, all the momentum, all of these things that I mentioned, all of these changes and reactions, the momentum behind them, the momentum behind the input that forced the reaction always starts online nowadays. And this shows that this momentum, this input generated online, has potential to create change. There is very little change, very little reaction, very weak output, because the input that starts online is weak and disorganized. And this brings us to the internet and the reason why I made this video. Probably by now you have noticed that this video isn't about cars or bikes or engines or mechanics. And I'm sure some people will find this unsettling, probably the same people that found a Spanish version of one of my videos deeply unsettling, because apparently the notion of seeing something slightly unexpected in your feed and having to scroll past it is traumatic. But that's okay, I'm sure they'll survive or finally unsubscribe. Please do. Now, no, this video isn't about cars or engines, but it is made based on 15 years of daily observation of the car, engine, motorcycle, vehicle, and all associated markets. And I've been observing these markets for the past 15 years. Not really because I had to, but because I wanted to. And the other part of the equation is that this video is made based on the observation and usage of the internet since almost day one. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember the very early days of the internet. Unfortunately, because I'm old, but not unfortunately because these days were bad, because the early days of the internet were really, really nice back then. I was a Napster user and had the best Winamp skins. But that's not the point. The point is that I remember what I was thinking about the internet when it first started and before it was as widespread and omnipresent as it is today. And I thought that the internet must be the next best thing that will happen to humanity, because it will end the possibility of anyone having a monopoly over truth. It will expose everyone to all of these different truths out there. And this means that anyone who has an irrational attachment to any irrational or dogmatic or absolute truth will be forced to abandon this attachment after being exposed to all of these differing truths, all who claim to be the truth. And this will then force everyone to question everything, which means that everyone will adopt the mentality of a true scientist, because a true scientist questions everything at all times, including him or herself. A scientist does not believe in the concept of absolute truth. This does not exist for a rational mind. What exists is simply the best we know at this time based on current evidence. That's it. And this, what we believe to be the truth at this time, may very well change in the future if the evidence and the facts around this phenomenon change. Therefore, truth for a scientist is fluid and ever-changing, and the scientist too is like the truth, fluid and ever-changing, always transforming, but he has direction. He is fluid, but he's always trying to move forward, to do better. And I was right. The internet did end the monopoly over truth, but I was completely wrong when it comes to the effects this would have on humanity. Instead of adopting this scientific, open-minded, rational mindset after being faced with all the different truths, different groups of humans simply flocked to their own individual truth, rejected all the other truths, and proceeded to adamantly defend their perspective and truth. Instead of collective rationalization, what we got is endless polarization. Just like in the time before the internet, only now more intensive, more frequent, and omnipresent, because we are all on our phones all the time and we get notifications when somebody responds to our post / tweet / comment / whatever. And now all these truths are juxtaposed against each other all the time, so the contrast and difference is even more painfully obvious, which means that now the energy, the sheer amount of energy and time wasted on arguing online is absolutely immeasurable. And of course, all sorts of different actors are very skilled at manipulating this polarization for their own cause or benefit. Divide and conquer, as the British colonialists love to say. So a very large percentage of the collective energy and potential that exists online is simply wasted on trying to prove who's right. But you see, even if you manage to change someone's opinion online, which will never happen, by the way, but even if you somehow manage to do it, you won't be achieving anything other than some sort of personal satisfaction. And this is because it doesn't matter who's right. The concepts of right, wrong, true, false, they do not exist in nature. Things in nature simply are. The grass grows, the gazelle eats the grass, the lion eats the gazelle. There's no right or wrong about it. It simply is. Right, wrong, true, false, left-wing, right-wing, you name it. These are simply mental crutches invented by humans with the goal of reducing the amount of thinking we have to do before taking an action. They are labels meant to ease the mental burden that occurs due to the incredible amount of information we have to process on a daily basis. But the labels do not matter in the grand scheme of things. The only things that matter are the consequences of our actions and survival. And the only thing that can ensure survival and progress is a rational mind. Because there's nothing more powerful than a rational, open, analytical mind. Everything we have achieved as a species, we have done so by thinking rationally. Yes, corporations wield immense power in the world we live in, but corporations are ultimately dependent on consumers. They may choose to ignore scientific research, the doctor's warnings, but they cannot afford to ignore the actions and the input of a large number of consumers. Without consumers to feed it, a corporation quickly dies. And the greater the number of consumers behind an input and an action, the greater the reaction or the output from the corporation. Currently, the internet is polarized, which means we can only manage pathetic, disorganized inputs. And therefore, the outputs are also pathetic, and the best we can hope for is to get rid of a monthly subscription for heated seats. But an internet where a collective rationality thrives could leverage its immense potential and wield actual power over both corporations and governments. An internet where a collective rationality thrives could ensure affordable, well-made, long-lasting, easy-to-repair products for everyone. An internet where a collective rationality thrives could ensure an environment where the end user is educated and empowered to repair these products because they're made easy to repair. And it's undeniable that this is good both for the consumer and for the environment. The technology to make it happen is here. The incentive and the pressure is not. And here's the important thing. Even if you believe that climate change is a hoax and that the environmental impact of humanity is negligible, that's totally fine. Everyone is entitled to every kind of opinion. But the rational thing is not to argue and to try to somehow prove that your opinion is correct and a different opinion is not. The rational thing is to skip past opinions because opinions do not matter. The rational thing is to find that common ground which has the greatest measurable collective benefit as its consequence. We may differ in opinion, but we must not differ in our rational understanding of that which benefits all of us. Thanks for watching.